To make life easier for my grandpa, I pay out of pocket to set up a well in the village. But since no one has ever bothered to maintain it, and because it has been raining heavily for several days now, mud and sediment end up getting into the well. The villagers assume that I cut corners when I had the well built, so they call me up to force me to pay for another well. When I refuse, they barricade Grandpa at his house and throw bricks into the courtyard in the middle of the night. I rush back to the village and see debris scattered everywhere. I say nothing. But Grandpa, an 80-year-old, gets so worked up that he shouts, "Where's your conscience? My grandson put in more than $80,000 of his own money to build the well, and he didn't charge any of you for that." Peggy Mitchell, the ringleader of the troublemakers, shouts right back at him, "Don't be ridiculous. He's the one who built the well, so now that there's a problem with it, he's responsible for it." Henrietta Nelson, the village chief, smokes a cigarette and says matter-of-factly, "We're all from the same village, Fred. Just put up the money to handle this." After 5 seconds of silence, I declare, "In that case, I'll bring a crew over this afternoon to fill in the well. You guys can head into town to get as many pails as you can. You're going to need to start hauling water from the river several miles away again." I had just gotten home from work when my phone buzzed with a video call from Grandpa, which I answered right away. But Grandpa didn't appear on the screen. Instead, it was the angry, flushed face of Peggy Mitchell, one of the residents at the village Grandpa lived in, that showed up. A crowd of other villagers had gathered behind her. "Fred Sherman. Look at the mess you made." Madam Mitchell screamed into the phone, her spit splattering onto the lens. "The water from the village well stinks. All we're pumping out now is muddy water. Everyone who's been drinking the water got diarrhea, and now, the whole village is here. You must have cut corners and pocketed the kickbacks when you handled this project. But now that the pipes are destroyed, the water's contaminated, and the entire village is in chaos, you happily hide away in the city to enjoy your riches. You'd better get your ass here now and put up the money to dig us a new well." All the way in the back, Grandpa was being shoved around, and he had to press himself against the wall in the corner. The other villagers started chiming in as well. "That's right. Make him come back to the village and dig us another well. He conned his own neighbors out of their money. How shameless of him." I was completely dumbfounded. My mind went blank. I was an orphan. After my parents died, Grandpa took me in. He relied on scavenging recyclables and bartering with the neighbors to keep me fed and clothed until I was all grown up. After I'd finally established myself in the city, I wanted him to move in with me so he could enjoy a comfortable life. But he insisted on staying in the village, claiming he wasn't used to city life. As for the well, I'd specifically hired a construction crew from Sons Hire, the state capital, to set it up in our village, Hopeville, 3 years ago. I also paid to install a water pump and lay pipes that ran directly into every house. The entire village got to use the water infrastructure for free. To ensure Grandpa could live comfortably in the village, I did everything in my power to win over the rest of the villagers. I also paid to build a senior activity center for them. During the festive season, I hauled truckloads of groceries back to the village and gave them out door to door. I always assumed that no one was made of stone. If I respected the villagers as my elders and treated them well, surely they would return my sincerity with kindness of their own. Madam Mitchell, the water from the well got contaminated because of the heavy rains. It has nothing to do with the quality of the construction. I did my best to restrain my anger and explain the situation to her. "Don't give me that nonsense." Madam Mitchell refused to listen to me. "Don't take us for fools just because we're from the countryside. You must have used lousy pipes. If you don't get back here today, dig a new well, and make this right." She whipped her head around and jabbed a finger at Grandpa. "Then that old bastard of a grandpa of yours can forget about having a moment of peace in this village. We'll come over and cause a scene every day. I can't wait to see how long he can stay alive under such circumstances." The call cut off abruptly, and when I called back, the phone had been turned off. I didn't even change out of my pajamas before grabbing my keys and shooting out the door. I drove as fast as I could. All I could think of was the sight of Grandpa, cowering and trembling against the wall. I never should have been kind. I should have known that some people didn't deserve an ounce of generosity. By the time I got back to the village, Grandpa's house was in ruins. The pots of flowers he'd lovingly tended had been smashed to pieces, the dirt scattered everywhere. The drying rack had been knocked over and was now lying in the mud. I saw broken pans and tableware strewn all over the lawn. There were even a few blood-stained bricks. Thankfully, the blood was from the chickens. They'd caught the 2 old hens Grandpa raised and thrown them violently to kill them right in front of him. The front door was ajar. Grandpa was bent over, clutching a broom and breathing heavily as he swept shards of broken glass out of the house. His hands were trembling. He could barely keep a steady grip on the broom. "Grandpa." My voice sounded rough and cracked. Grandpa was stunned to see me. Then his expression changed, and the broom slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground. Freddie. He took 2 steps toward me and nearly collapsed. I rushed over and caught him. His body felt like ice. When I touched his clothes, I could tell they were drenched with sweat. Are you hurt, Grandpa? I asked as I checked him over from head to toe. He shook his head. His weathered face was twisted with grief and indignation as he gripped my hand with surprising force. Freddie. His voice was thick with both anger and sorrow. Let's leave this place. When he said those words, it felt like a hammer that struck me in the heart. I knew exactly what that meant to him. Grandpa and Grandma had built this house themselves, brick by brick. It was home to a lifetime of his memories. In the past, no matter how much I'd tried to convince him, he'd adamantly refused to leave. But now, he was suggesting it himself. Okay. I clenched my teeth, forcing down the heartache I felt. Let's leave. I'd spent years trying to cajole him into enjoying a comfortable life with me in the city. He always said the village was home, that his old neighbors were here, along with the scenery he knew by heart. But now, he had finally seen the villagers for who they really were. I straightened up and went into the house. After pulling out a suitcase, I quickly stuffed in a few of Grandpa's old clothes, along with the blood pressure medication he took every day. Let's go, Grandpa. The sky was slowly lightening, and the rain had stopped. I carried the suitcase in one hand and supported Grandpa with the other. However, the moment we reached the front gate, a crowd surged in and blocked our path. Madam Mitchell stood in the lead with a shovel in hand. She swung it against my car. The metal tip slammed into the front bumper, chipping off a patch of paint. Then she shot me a glare and sneered. Trying to run away, huh? Forget about it. I eyed her coldly. Get out of the way. But she simply spat on the ground. You want me to get out of the way? You ruined the village well. None of us has access to clean water now. Yet you want to just dust off your hands and walk away? What makes you think we'll let you get off that easy? I scoffed in anger. You're accusing me of ruining the well? The rainstorm went on for 3 days, but no one even bothered to get a cover for the well. That's how the mud and silt got in. The water got contaminated because nobody bothered to maintain the well during the storm. It has nothing to do with the construction work. I repeated my explanation once more. But Madam Mitchell simply jutted her chin out and screeched back at me, stop using the rain as your excuse. The rain hit the neighboring village too, so why is it that their well is perfectly fine, huh? You must have embezzled the money for the well and bought shoddy pipes. And don't forget that you charged every household $20 when you dug that well. There are over 100 households here, so that's over $2,000. Don't you dare swear to me that you didn't pocket any of that money. Her words got the crowd going, and they all started lashing out at me, shouting their heads off about the $20. She's right. I paid $20. So did I. Give it back. Give us back our hard-earned money. They all pointed at my face and cursed me out, their spit almost hitting me. 3 years ago, I hired the best construction crew and Sons hired to set up that well. They used the best pipes on the market, which had been certified to be thick and durable. The total cost for the entire water infrastructure came out to precisely $86,500. I paid for everything out of my own pocket. But to ensure that the villagers didn't take the water for granted because of how little they had to do to get it, I collected $20 from each household just for symbolic purposes. I set aside their money for future maintenance costs. Even though there were over 100 households in the village, the amount I collected only came out to $2,400. That wasn't even enough to pay for the water pump the crew installed. Grandpa was shaking with rage. He pulled free from my grip and strode to the front. Pointing a trembling finger at Madam Mitchell, he shouted, "Have you no conscience? My grandson paid more than $80,000 out of his own pocket to build that well. He never took an extra cent from any of you. But now, you're accusing him of embezzling your money and ruining the well? How could anyone be as ungrateful as you lot?" Grandpa's voice was loud, but it was soon drowned out by the curses from the crowd. Derek Walters, another one of the villagers, pushed his way to the crowd. With his hands on his hips, he called out sarcastically, Now, Mr. Sherman Sr., don't even try to cover for your grandson. $80,000? You've got to be kidding me. He's just a greenhorn fresh out of college. Where would he have that kind of money? He must have run off into the city with our money and seduced some wealthy woman to sponge off her. Now that the well is ruined, he must take full responsibility for that. We'll only drop this matter if he hands over $100,000. $100,000, huh? They'd even settled on the price already. I pulled Grandpa behind me. Shielding him with my body, I eyed the familiar faces before me. When I was still young, I did receive a thing or two from these people. Madam Mitchell gave me a dinner roll once. Mr. Walters gave me an old coat. I remembered these acts, so once I'd made something of myself, I'd done my best to repay the villagers. But now, these familiar faces were sporting nasty, twisted expressions. They looked like a swarm of leeches that had caught the scent of blood. Fine. I nodded. Since you're all so fixated on the numbers, let's settle this matter once and for all, right here in front of everyone. I got my phone out and made a call. It rang 3 times before it connected. Ms. Shore. I'd called Erica Shore, the village council president. The cursing from the villagers quietened down a bit. Oh, hi, Fred. Are you back in the village? Ms. Shore's voice sounded a bit awkward. Clearly, she knew what was going on, but she'd chosen to just stay out of it. I'm standing outside my grandpa's house right now. My gaze swept over Madam Mitchell and Mr. Walters. Kindly bring over all the documentation and financial records for the well I built back then, along with all the invoices. Oh, and don't forget the ledger for the $2,400 I collected from the villagers. Do it now. My tone was firm, making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. Ms. Shore stiffened. Well, the sun hasn't even risen yet, Anne. If you don't come over now, I'll have no choice but to call the police. I cut her off bluntly. I'll report these people for trespassing, disturbing the peace, and willful destruction of private property. Considering the damage to Grandpa's house, they'll probably have to spend a few months behind bars. Ms. Shore was silent for 5 seconds before saying, I'll be right there. I ended the call and looked at Madam Mitchell once more. Today, we're going to settle this account once and for all. The morning mist clung low over the rutted dirt road of Hopeville. 5 minutes. After my phone call, the crunch of gravel signaled Erica Shore's arrival. She parked her electric scooter near the perimeter of the crowd, clutching a thick, vinyl-bound folder against her chest like a shield. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously between me, the smashed flower pots in Grandpa's yard, and the angry circle of villagers clutching sticks, shovels, and hose. Fred, Erica began, her voice tentative, trying to adopt a neutral tone. Everyone is upset. The water went bad, and emotions are running hot. We're all neighbors here. Let's not talk about the police. Hand me the folder, Miss Shore, I said, stepping forward. Madam Mitchell thrust her chest out, raising the shovel again. Don't let him hide behind some phony papers. He took our money. $20 a family. Where did it go? Into his shiny city car, that's where. Shut your mouth, Peggy, I said, not raising my voice, but letting the ice in. It cut through the crisp air. If you interrupt me again before I finish reading this ledger, I'll add a harassment charge to the property damage report I'm filing against you. She faltered for a fraction of a second, unsettled by the fact that I didn't flinch. I took the ledger from Erica, flipped it open, and held it high so everyone in the front row could see the official village seal stamped across the top. On May 14th 3 years ago, I said, projecting my voice clearly across the yard, I signed a tripartite contract with the Hopeville Village Committee and Sons Hire Municipal Drilling and Engineering Corporation. Total project cost $86,500. Here is the bank transfer receipt bearing my name and my account number. $86,500, paid in full by Fred Sherman. I tore off the copy of the bank receipt and pinned it against the wooden post of Grandpa's broken gate for all to see. Next, I continued, flipping the page. The $20 maintenance fee. 120 households contributed, totaling $2,400. Under the agreement witnessed by Ms. Shore, that entire sum was deposited into a designated local credit union account under the Hopeville Committee's name. I never touched a dime of it. In fact, look at the last line. Over 3 years, with interest, that account now holds $2,462.18. A murmur rippled through the back rows. Several older men exchanged uneasy glances. Here are the receipts for the pipes, I pointed to the itemized annex. High-density polyethylene, heavy-duty industrial grade, certified for 40 years of underground use. The Sons Hire engineering team left an operation manual in the village office. Page 4 explicitly states, in the event of continuous heavy rainfall exceeding 48 hours, the surface runoff drainage channel must be cleared, and the top seal collar must be fastened to prevent surface silt backflow. I closed the folder with a sharp snap that sounded like a gunshot in the morning. Quiet. It rained non-stop for 3 straight days. Who among you went to inspect the Drainage trench? Who tightened the top seal collar? Silence fell over the crowd. None of you, I said coldly. Because you got clean water running straight into your kitchens with the turn of a tap, and you thought it fell from heaven. You didn't spend a single cent on routine upkeep. You let wild grass clog the drainage channel, let silt build up around the casing, and when the floodwaters rose, you let the mud spill right down the bore shaft. Derek Walters shifted his weight, his face turning an ugly shade of red. He spat on the ground and waved his hands dismissively. Who knows if those papers are real? Anyone can print out a piece of paper. Even if you paid for it back then. You gave it to the village. It belongs to us now. Since you built it, you're the one who has to maintain it. If the water's bad, you have to dig us a new one, or give us $100,000 in compensation for ruining our health. That's right. Peggy Mitchell screeched, regaining her courage. My grandson drank that water and had an upset stomach. You poisoned my family. You're going to pay. Before I could answer, a woman in a dark fleece jacket walked through the crowd, an unlit cigarette dangling between her lips. It was Henrietta Nelson, the village chief. She carried herself with the slow, deliberate arrogance of someone who had ruled a small pond for 20 years. She glanced at the dead hens lying in the yard, looked at my car's scuffed bumper, and then turned her gaze to me. Fred, Henrietta said, striking a match against her thumb and lighting the cigarette. She took a slow drag, puffing blue smoke into the chilly air. You're a bright young man. You made good in the city. But you can't forget your roots. What roots, Chief Nelson? I asked. Hopeville raised your grandfather, and Hopeville raised you, she said. Smoothly, using that patronizing village elder tone designed to trap younger generations in moral obligations. Now, look around. People are upset because they're thirsty. Water is life. You've got money. What's 80,000 or 100,000 to a big shot like you? Digging another well will only take you a fraction of your annual bonus. You do this for the village, and we'll forget about the broken pots and the noise last night. We're all one big family. Grandpa trembled, his weathered hands balling into fists inside his jacket pockets. Henrietta Nelson. You speak like a thief. When my Freddie was starving. As a boy, did the village committee give him a grain of rice? When I worked 16 hours a day collecting scrap cardboard in the rain, did you knock on my door with a loaf of bread? He spent his own sweat and blood to bring you water, so I could live in peace, and you let these animals smash my home. Old man, watch your mouth, Derek sneered. We're letting your grandson make things right. Don't push your luck. I gently placed a hand on Grandpa's shoulder, stepping in front of him. Chief Nelson, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. You think this well belongs to the village? It's on Hopeville soil, isn't it? Henrietta smirked faintly. The borehole was drilled inside the boundary lines of Grandpa's homestead parcel, I replied, pointing to the rusted iron stake 30 yards away near the orchard edge. The land deed is registered under my grandfather's name. The water pump and the solar converter units were purchased in my personal name. In legal terms, that well is private property, lent to the village on a conditional basis. Peggy Mitchell sneered loudly. So what? Are you going to drink all that water yourself? If you don't fix it, we won't let you leave. I checked my wristwatch. It was 6:45 a.m. I won't be fixing it, I said flatly. Henrietta narrowed her eyes. Fred, don't be stubborn. If you leave without fixing this, I can't guarantee your grandfather's house will stay intact when you're gone. That was an open threat. I looked at Henrietta, then at Peggy, Derek, and the silent, complicit crowd behind them. For 3 years, I had believed that generosity could buy goodwill. I thought that by paving roads, building recreation rooms, and bringing water to their doorsteps, they would treat my elderly grandfather with basic decency. Instead, my kindness had only fed their sense of entitlement until they believed my wealth belonged to them. I don't need to worry about the house, I said evenly. Because Grandpa is leaving with me today. Right now. A murmur went through the crowd. And as for the well, I continued, my voice echoing across the courtyard. Since you believe I cut corners, embezzled your $20, and poisoned your families, I will relieve you of the burden of using my inferior infrastructure. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number on speakerphone. The line connected after 2 rings. Hello? Mr. Sherman, a gruff voice came over the speaker. Master Harrison, I said clearly. Bring the 2 excavators, the flatbed, and the demolition crew we spoke about. Head out from the county yard right now. I need you at Hopeville by 1 p.m. Copy that, Mr. Sherman. We have the concrete mix and the pneumatic hammers. Ready. We'll seal the borehole and dismantle the pump stations as requested. I hung up. The courtyard fell dead silent. What did you say? Peggy stuttered, her eyes widening. I looked at her with a calm smile, you have until 1 o'clock to fill whatever containers you have left. This afternoon, I am demolishing the pump station, ripping up the main feed lines on my property, and pouring 3 tons of quick-dry concrete straight down the borehole. You guys can head into town to get as many pails as you can. You're going to need to start hauling water from the river 3 miles away again. For nearly 10 seconds, nobody made a sound. Then, Derek barked out a laugh. Though it sounded strained. You're bluffing. You spent over 80 grand on that well. You're going to pour concrete down it just out of spite? Who are you trying to scare? I don't bluff with people who kill my grandfather's chickens and smash his windows, Derek, I said quietly. You can't do that. Peggy shrieked, panic creeping into her voice. The water pipes run through the whole village. That pump provides water for over 400 people. If you fill the well, what are we supposed to drink? Drink from the river, I replied. Like you did for 50 years before I spent my money here. The river water is free. Nobody will embezzle your $20. There. Chief. Look at him. Peggy turned to Henrietta, pulling on her sleeve. He's acting like a tyrant. Tell him he can't do this. Henrietta's expression had turned sour. The cigarette had burned down to the filter, singeing her fingers before she dropped it onto the wet dirt. Fred, she said, her voice dropping the mock-friendly facade, turning harsh. If you do this, you're making an enemy of the entire village. You think you can just come into our community, stir up trouble, and walk away clean? I'm not walking away clean, I said. I'm leaving with the law on my side. Right on cue, the distant wail of a siren echoed across the valley. 2 white and blue police cruisers bumped over the dirt road and pulled up directly behind my car. 4 officers in dark uniforms stepped out, led by Sergeant Vance, an officer from the county precinct whom I had contacted before leaving the city. The villagers instantly tensed. Derek instinctively dropped the thick wooden club he was holding behind his back, kicking it under a bush. Peggy pulled her shovel down, trying to blend into the crowd. What's going on here? Sergeant Vance demanded, his hand resting on his utility belt as his sharp gaze swept over the broken glass, the bloodied bricks, and the battered car. Officer Vance, I stepped forward, producing my identification. I called in the report. At approximately 2 a.m., a group of villagers trespassed onto my grandfather's private property, threw bricks through his windows, slaughtered his livestock, and made verbal threats against his life. When I arrived, they blocked my exit and vandalized my vehicle with a shovel. I pointed directly at the front bumper of my car, where fresh scratches matched the tip of Peggy's shovel, then turned toward the house. The damages exceed $5,000, which qualifies as felony property destruction under state law. Furthermore, they attempted to extort $100,000 from me under threat of violence. Peggy's face turned from red to ash white. No. That's a lie. We're just here to talk about the well. Talk. Sergeant Vance walked over to the shattered front window, picked up a heavy red brick lying on the floorboards, and looked at her. You talk with bricks through an 80-year-old man's bedroom window? He turned to his partner. Take photos of all the damage. Document the vehicle, the dead poultry, and collect the brick for fingerprint analysis. Wait. Officer, this is a village matter. Henrietta stepped forward, trying to use her authority. I am Henrietta Nelson, the village chief. We can resolve this internally. Chief Nelson, Sergeant Vance interrupted sternly. Criminal property destruction and extortion are not internal village matters. If you were present during this unlawful assembly and failed to intervene, You may be cited as an accessory. Henrietta choked on her words, backing away instantly. The villagers behind her began scattering, retreating toward their homes like rats sensing a sinking ship. Peggy Mitchell, Derek Walters, Sergeant Vance commanded. Stay right where you are. You're coming down to the station to give formal statements. I didn't do anything. It was Derek who threw the bricks. Peggy cried out, pointing her finger without hesitation. You lying bitch. You were the one who brought the kerosene and told us to scare the old man. Derek roared back, lunging toward her before the officers grabbed his arms and forced him against the cruiser hood. Grandpa stood by my side, watching the two people who had terrorized him just hours ago turn on each other like wild dogs. He let out a long, heavy sigh, the tension finally leaving his frail shoulders. Freddie, he whispered, clutching my arm. Pack the car. Let's go. Right away, Grandpa. By noon, Grandpa's most cherished possessions were packed into the trunk and back seat of my SUV, Grandma's old sewing basket, a stack of black and white family photographs, his favorite wooden rocking chair, and 3 bags of clothes. I had already settled Grandpa into a comfortable hotel suite in the neighboring county seat, leaving him with warm food and a private nurse to monitor his elevated blood pressure before returning to Hopeville. When I drove back into the village at 12:45 p.m., the atmosphere had drastically shifted. Word of Peggy and Derek's arrest had spread through every alley. The arrogance that had filled the village that morning was completely gone, replaced by a suffocating anxiety. Dozens of villagers were lined up near the public taps with plastic buckets, pots, tubs, and empty oil drums, frantically trying to draw whatever muddy water still trickled through the pipes. At precisely 1 p.m., the roar of heavy diesel engines rumbled down the valley road. A massive yellow excavator, accompanied by a flatbed transport carrying a crane arm and a heavy commercial concrete mixer, ground to a halt outside Grandpa's property. 10 rugged construction workers in orange vests and hard hats jumped down, led by Master Harrison. Mr. Sherman. Harrison walked over, shaking my hand. We brought the industrial pump extractors and 40 bags of rapid-setting hydraulic concrete as specified. Where do we begin? Start with the solar generator and the multi-stage pressure pump, I said, loudly enough for the gathered onlookers to hear. Dismantle them carefully. I paid for them, they're coming back with me to the city. Then, use the pneumatic drill to break the concrete apron around the wellhead, lower the cap, and fill the bore shaft to the surface. Understood. Team, get to work. The roar of the excavator's engine shattered the valley's quiet. Within minutes, the mechanical crane hooked onto the $3,000 stainless steel industrial pump assembly, yanking it straight up out of the ground with a screech of shearing bolts. The water supply to every house in Hopeville ceased instantly. Stop. Please stop. A dozen villagers rushed toward the fence, led by an elderly couple who lived 2 doors down from Grandpa. It was Old Man Miller and his wife, people who had stood silently that morning while Peggy and Derek smashed my grandfather's yard. Freddie, boy. Old Man Miller pleaded, his hands shaking as he leaned against the fence. You can't do this. If you fill the well, what will we drink? It's summer. The heat will dry up the shallow ditches. Mr. Miller, I looked at him calmly. When Derek threw a brick that barely missed my grandfather's head at 2 a.m, where were you? Miller swallowed, lowering his head. I was asleep. You were standing right behind Peggy this morning when she called my grandfather an old bastard, I said mercilessly. You didn't say a single word. You thought that if they bullied me into giving up $100,000, you'd get a share of the pie, or at least a brand new well for free. Freddie, we were wrong. Mrs. Miller burst into tears. We were fools. We'll help clean your grandfather's yard. We'll buy new chickens. Just leave the well. Too late, I said. The concrete mixer backed into position over the wellhead. The operator pulled the hydraulic lever, and a thick, gray torrent of heavy concrete slurry poured directly down the 50-meter steel-cased borehole. Glug. Glug. Ssh. The heavy liquid filled every crevice, locking the deep subterranean aquifers beneath a permanent, impenetrable plug of rock-solid cement. The villagers watched in stunned horror. Some sank to their knees in the mud. staring at the gray slurry hardening in the summer sun. I wasn't done. I walked over to the newly built brick building 200 yards away, the Hopeville Senior Recreation Center, which I had paid $30,000 to build 2 years ago. The electricity for the center was tied to a dedicated commercial transformer that I subsidized every month on autopay. I pulled out my phone, opened my utility management app, and canceled the account on the spot. Then, I handed Master Harrison a pair of heavy industrial padlocks. Lock the front gates of the center, I instructed. I'm terminating the property lease agreement with the village committee tomorrow. Any unauthorized entry will be treated as commercial burglary. Got it, Mr. Sherman. I turned back to the crowd of pale, silent villagers. You wanted to settle accounts, I said, adjusting my jacket. Now we're settled. I climbed into my SUV, put the car in reverse, and drove out of Hopeville. Without looking back once. 2 weeks passed. In Sun's Hire, I settled Grandpa into a spacious, sunlit 3-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor of a quiet, gated community. The compound had a lush central garden with paved walking paths, a koi pond, and a lively community pavilion, where dozens of retirees gathered every morning to play chess and practice Tai Chi. Grandpa had been timid at first, terrified that he would be looked down upon by city folks. But within 3 days, his warm demeanor and green thumb won everyone over. The management granted him a small raised garden bed near the sunny corner of the courtyard, where he happily planted tomatoes, bell peppers, and fresh mint. His blood pressure stabilized, the deep creases of worry on his forehead gradually relaxed, and for the first time in years, he slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. Meanwhile, 70 miles away in Hopeville, reality had turned into a waking nightmare. July brought a relentless heat wave. The temperature in the valley soared past 95 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 consecutive days. Without the deep well and automated water pumps, the village was thrown back 50 years into the past. The river 3 miles away was not the pristine mountain stream it had been in the 1970s. Upstream sand mining and agricultural runoff had turned the water murky and yellowish. To get drinking water, every family had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. before the sun became unbearable, load wheelbarrows and shoulder poles with heavy plastic jugs, and trudge 3 miles down a dusty, unpaved path to haul water back. Carrying 2 5-gallon jugs of water under the scorching sun for 3 miles was brutal labor for the elderly villagers whose adult children worked far away. In coastal factories, a single round trip took 3 exhausting hours. By the second week, several older folks suffered heat exhaustion. The local village chat group, which used to be filled with gossip and smug photos, turned into an endless battleground of curses and blame. Old Man Miller, my back gave out yesterday carrying 2 buckets. The water from the river is full of sand. After boiling it, there's a thick layer of white scale at the bottom of the pot. My grandson has diarrhea again. Mrs. Clark, this is all Peggy Mitchell's fault. If she hadn't stirred up trouble and smashed old man Sherman's house, Fred would have never filled the well. Derek's wife, don't you dare blame my husband. You were all cheering when they demanded $100,000. None of you spoke up for the Shermans back then. Mrs. Clark, shut your mouth. Your husband is a criminal. He's sitting in the county detention center right now while we have to haul water like pack mules. The tension exploded on the 15th day of the heat wave. A massive fistfight broke out near the shallow riverbank between the Mitchell family and the Miller family over a spot near a Cleaner Spring tributary. Shovels and buckets were swung, 3 people were hospitalized with broken ribs, and the local precinct had to send riot units to restore order. Hopeville had become the laughingstock of the entire township. Faced with mounting pressure and fury from the villagers, Chief Henrietta Nelson could no longer hide in her air-conditioned office. She called an emergency village assembly at the committee office. We don't need Fred Sherman, Henrietta announced from behind the wooden podium, slamming her fist down. He thinks he's the only one with money? He thinks we can't survive without him? The village committee will fund a new well. A bigger one. A deeper one. Where's the money coming from? Someone shouted from the back. We don't have $80,000 in the village fund. We will do a village-wide assessment, Henrietta declared. Every household will contribute $300. With the matching grant from the Township's Rural Development Fund will have $40,000. I've already contacted a professional drilling team from the neighboring province. The villagers grumbled, but with their throats parched and their backs aching from hauling river water, they had no choice. Within 4 days, over 100 families scraped together their hard-earned cash, handing over nearly $35,000 to Henrietta. The professional drilling team arrived 3 days later in 2 battered trucks. The leader, a greasy man named Boss Keller, wore a thick fake gold chain and promised heaven and earth. "Don't worry, Chief Nelson," Keller boasted, puffing on an expensive cigar Henrietta had bought for him. "Our rigs can drill 300 meters deep. We'll find an underground mineral spring. It'll be purer than bottled water." They set up their rig near the public square and began drilling with a deafening clatter. For 4 days, the village watched with high hopes. Every evening, Henrietta treated Boss Keller and his crew to lavish banquets at the village restaurant, paid for with the collective funds. On the 5th day, the drill rig suddenly ground to a screeching halt with a horrific metallic crunch. Boss Keller inspected the shaft, his face turning pale. He quickly pulled Henrietta aside. "Chief, we hit a massive granite bedrock layer at 80 meters, Keller whispered, sweating profusely. "Our drill bit snapped clean off. It's jammed 50 meters down. Then fish it out and drill somewhere else," Henrietta said, panicking. "To break through that granite, we need diamond-tipped rotary drills and seismic mapping. That'll cost an extra $60,000, Keller said smoothly. "If you can't pay, we have to pack up." "What about the $35,000 we already gave you?" Henrietta grabbed his collar, her voice screeching. "Read the contract, lady," Keller sneered, shoving her hands away and pulling out a wrinkled piece of paper. Clause 8, geological anomalies, drill jams, and subterranean bedrock obstructions constitute force majeure. Drilling fees are non-refundable once work commences. We worked for 4 days. The fuel and labor cost money. Goodbye." Before Henrietta could scream for help, Keller and his men loaded their broken equipment onto the flatbeds, revved their engines, and sped out of Hopeville, kicking up clouds of yellow dust. The villagers, who had gathered expecting to see water gush from the earth, were left staring at a dry, jammed iron pipe protruding uselessly from the ground. $35,000, the savings of dozens of impoverished farming families, had vanished into thin air in less than a week. When the realization hit, the crowd snapped. "Henrietta Nelson, you thief! You conspired with swindlers to steal our money. Give us our money back. That was my son's college tuition." A mob of furious villagers surged into the committee office. Desks were flipped. Windows were shattered, and Henrietta had to barricade herself in the bathroom, weeping hysterically while calling the county police for rescue. While Hopeville was tearing itself apart, my life in Sons Hire moved forward smoothly. My logistics software company had just closed a major Series B funding round, securing $6 million in institutional investment. I had expanded the office to a new floor in the financial district and bought Grandpa a brand new, comfortable hybrid SUV with soft leather seats for our weekend drives to the countryside parks. One Friday afternoon, as I was wrapping up a board meeting, my phone rang with a call from the front desk of my apartment building. "Mr. Sherman? This is security. There are 4 people at the gate claiming to be your relatives from Hopeville. They're making a scene, demanding to see you and your grandfather." I frowned. "Who are they?" "A woman named Henrietta Nelson, another woman named Peggy Mitchell, and 2 young men. One of them is holding a video camera and trying to stream live to social media." I let out a cold laugh. Peggy had apparently been released on bail pending trial, and instead of reflecting on her crimes, she had tracked down my address. "Don't let them pass the security barrier," I said. "Keep the gates locked. I'll be down in 15 minutes. When I stepped out of the lobby and walked toward the gated entrance of the compound, I saw a pathetic spectacle. Henrietta looked like she had aged 10 years. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair messy, and her face gaunt. Peggy was wearing a neck brace, probably a cheap prop to claim injury, and behind her stood her 25-year-old son, Jason Mitchell, holding his smartphone on a selfie stick, shouting dramatically into the screen. "Look at this, folks." Jason was shouting into his live stream. "This is the CEO. Of Sherman Tech. He made millions, but he abandoned his home village. He poisoned our water supply, filled our only well with concrete, and left 400 elderly folks to die of thirst. Now he lives in a luxury-gated community, while my poor mother has to beg for mercy. The few passers-by on the sidewalk slowed down, looking curiously at the commotion. I walked steadily toward the wrought iron gate, flanked by 4 burly compound security guards. Freddie. Peggy threw herself against the iron bars, tears streaming down her face with terrifying speed. Freddie, have mercy on us. We were blind. We were possessed by the devil. We didn't know what we were doing. Fred, Henrietta said, her voice hoarse and trembling, completely stripped of her former arrogance. The village is finished. The drillers scammed us out of our money. People have no water. The township is investigating the committee's finances. If you don't help us drill a new well, I'm going to prison. And what does that have to do with me? I asked, looking at them through the bars with utter indifference. You're a native of Hopeville. Jason yelled, thrusting his phone camera through the bars, pointing the lens straight at my face. You have a moral duty to your homeland. If you don't give us $50,000 right now to fix the water, I'll post this video on TikTok and Twitter. I'll expose your company as a heartless, fraudulent business. Let's see what your investors think of your reputation. I looked at Jason's phone, then looked at his smug, desperate face. Are you done? I asked quietly. Give us the money, or I press upload. Jason threatened. I pulled out my phone, tapped a single button, and held it up to my ear. Mr. Vance? They're here. Around the corner of the avenue, 2 marked Sons Hire police cruisers glided to a halt behind Jason's parked car. 4 officers stepped out, accompanied by an attorney in a tailored suit, Richard Vance, the senior partner of Sunshire's top litigation firm, whom I had retained on a permanent retainer. Jason's smug expression froze. Jason Mitchell, Attorney Vance, stepped forward, pulling a stack of legal documents from his briefcase. I am representing Fred Sherman and Sherman Technology Group. Under State Penal Code Section 518, your actions over the past 15 minutes constitute criminal extortion, attempted blackmail via digital coercion, and unlawful defamation targeting a corporate executive. Everything you have said on that live stream has been captured and archived by our digital forensics team. Vance turned his gaze to Peggy. Furthermore, Madam Mitchell, you are currently out on bail for felony vandalism and criminal intimidation in Hopeville County Court, violating the terms of your bail by crossing county lines to harass the victim automatically revokes your bail status. Peggy's knees gave out completely. She collapsed onto the pavement, clutching the iron fence with trembling hands. No. No, please. Officer, I didn't do anything. It was my son's idea. Mom. Shut up. Jason screamed, panicking as 2 officers grabbed his arms and twisted them behind his back, snapping stainless steel handcuffs around his wrists. Put the phone down. You have the right to remain silent, the officer stated coldly, confiscating the selfie stick and shutting down the live stream. Henrietta stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the disaster unfold. She looked at me, her lips quivering, completely broken. Fred. She whimpered. We're all from the same bloodline. Is there really no way out? There was a way out, I said, looking down at her from behind the gate. 3 years ago, when I brought clean water to your doorsteps and built you a senior center. You had clean water, dignity, and a peaceful village. But you chose greed. You chose malice. You thought that because I was kind, I was weak. I took a step back into the sunlit courtyard of the compound. Take them away, I told the officers. The legal hammer fell swift and merciless. 1 month later, the Hopeville County Court convened for a public trial that drew journalists and local residents from across the region. The evidence presented by Attorney Vance was ironclad. High-definition security footage, forensic analysis of the bricks thrown into Grandpa's home, matched paint scrapings from Peggy's shovel on my car, bank transaction ledgers, and audio recordings of their extortion attempts left no room for defense. The verdicts were read aloud in a packed courtroom. Derek Walters, found guilty of felony destruction of property, trespassing. and criminal intimidation. Sentenced to 4 years in state prison without eligibility for parole for the first 18 months, plus an order of restitution of $8,400 for vehicle repairs and property damage. Peggy Mitchell, found guilty of instigating an unlawful assembly, criminal intimidation, and felony extortion. Sentenced to 3 years and 6 months in prison. Jason Mitchell, found guilty of attempted digital extortion and cyber blackmail. Sentenced to 1 year in county detention and ordered to pay $15,000 in civil damages to Sherman Technology Group. Henrietta Nelson, an official audit launched by the Township Commission, revealed extensive embezzlement of public funds, illegal misappropriation of the well drilling assessment, and gross dereliction of duty. She was stripped of her party membership, removed from her post as village chief, and sentenced to 5 years in prison for public corruption and fraud. The Hopeville Senior Recreation Center was legally repossessed by my company, since the land lease had been terminated due to material breach of contract by the village committee. I hired Master Harrison's team once more to dismantle the building down to the foundation. The bricks, solar panels, and steel beams were donated entirely to a registered orphanage in the state capital. Not a single nail was left for Hopeville. As for the $2,400 in the credit union escrow account, under court order, the bank returned the exact sum of $20 to each registered household via registered postal mail. When the villagers opened those envelopes and held their $20 bills in their hands, knowing they had traded a lifetime of clean, automated drinking water for $20 measly, many of them wept openly in the streets. Autumn arrived in suns higher with cool breezes and golden ginkgo leaves fluttering across the paved walkways of our community. On a Saturday morning, I walked down to the central courtyard carrying 2 cups of warm tea. Grandpa was kneeling by his raised garden bed, wearing a straw hat and canvas gardening gloves. His tomato plants had grown lush and heavy, laden with clusters of plump, bright red fruit that glistened with morning dew. Surrounding him were 4 elderly neighbors from the building, retired professors, former factory workers, and an old military veteran. "Look at that, Sherman." Old man Henderson, the veteran, chuckled, pointing at a massive heirloom tomato. "You've got the best touch with soil in the entire city. My wife wants to know what fertilizer you're using." "Pure compost and clean water, Henderson." Grandpa laughed heartily, his face glowing with healthy color. "You treat the soil with care, and the soil gives back what's good. It's that simple." Grandpa spotted me walking over, wiped his hands on his apron, and took the cup of tea with a bright, genuine smile. "Freddie, look at these peppers. We'll have enough to make spicy relish for the whole floor this week." "They look great, Grandpa," I said, sitting beside him on the wooden bench under the shade of the ginkgo tree. He took a slow sip of the warm tea, gazing out over the clean, quiet courtyard, watching children ride scooters around the fountain while gentle classical music drifted from the community speakers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Freddie," Grandpa said softly, his voice full of peace. "Yes, Grandpa." "I was a stubborn old fool for so many years," he murmured, looking at his calloused hands. "I thought that dirt was home just because I bled into it. I thought people were kind just because I grew old next to them." He looked up at me, his eyes clear and bright, free of the sorrow that had haunted him on that terrible rainy morning. "Home isn't a patch of mud where people wait to bleed you dry. Home is where there is respect, peace, and the people who truly love you." I smiled, reaching out to clasp his weathered hand. "Drink your tea, Grandpa. The water's fresh." Grandpa nodded, taking another long, satisfying drink. "It's sweet as honey."